design can be different. Web designers, user interface designers, or even fashion designers, style, taste, and trends are the most important. There are so much the designers put into the environment. In this video, we talk about trends for website design and user interface design. Start with trends from the past that was popular in every digital platforms, Skeuomorphism.
My name is Simon Heron. I'm one of the founding partners of 3 Men Squared. We're a full-service agency dealing with everything from video through to social media, print, and all aspects of branding. What do I know about skeuomorphism? My understanding of it is that it's a visual representation of an object that allows people to instantly know what something does within a digital environment. So, for example, a trash can, or rubbish bin as we'd say, looks like a rubbish bin. This was, I think, really pioneered by Apple, and I think Apple did a great job in helping people feel less threatened by the digital environment. Skeuomorphic design is a great idea. You know, to me it allowed people who are not familiar with the vernacular of digital to be able to embrace it and not feel threatened by it.
Some years back, around the time that the iPhone was invented, and it was probably perpetuated by the iOS interface at that period of time, and it has since evolved away to flat design, and now there's like Google material design, which is kind of a mixture between flat and, you know, some skeuomorphic elements as well.
You can certainly see, particularly with web design, how that's changed quite a lot over the years, and how iconography of that kind of thing in general, people immediately now will recognise certain marks, certain symbols, without having to necessarily explain to them what it is. It's become such a part of our, you know, from using phones to shopping online, everybody understands certain icons without having to say this is a bin or this is a home button, or etc. But also from a design point of view, there's obviously changed quite a bit. They're now more linear, or have been more linear. But what's quite interesting is now, particularly with mobile, you've got things like, you know, they're about to launch the new iPhone, where the emojis are going to be completely 3D and animated, which has kind of gone full circle again. It's like they started off as being 3-dimensional, then went linear, and now we're going back to sort of more animated, more 3-dimensional. So I think there'll be a lot more of that, I think, moving forward. I think there'll be almost video level kind of animation where those icons take on a whole new life, I think.
Flat design has evolved because people have got more sophisticated in their knowledge, and I think it's probably more elegant and it's cleaner. But ultimately, I think these things are quite fashion orientated. I think you still get a camera, even if it's a flat design camera. So whether it's represented with bevels and shadows or whether it's flat, it's still a camera. Design changes, people's attitudes change, people are always looking for a fresh new look. I mean, yeah, I like the cleanness, I like the modernity of it, but I dare say in another 6 years' time there's going to be another look. But a camera's a camera, whether it's skeuomorphic or it's an icon, that's not changing.
Visually, as soon as you start to get into more textured, three-dimensional with shadows and things like that, you'll build up a lot of work, but also, again, going back to responsive thing, it's very difficult to then pro these things up and for it to still hold. With icons, particularly online, you tend to go for SVGs, for example, files, which still retain their kind of smooth, nice edges, very clear, very, very sharp. So you can produce very beautiful looking, three-dimensional images and icons, but as soon as you start to get to an adaptive point of view in particular, if they pro up, you start to lose a lot of the clarity. And that's where, for me, two-dimensional flat design, particularly digital, works so much better, because it's going to always retain a very sharp, clear, crisp image.
Material design is basically Google's sort of framework for interface design. So but it's also being adopted by other platforms. Designers are adopting it to design other digital platforms as well. But it was primarily Google's framework for designing, any digital interface. But it has kind of, because of the way it's pushing flat design forward a bit, I think people are adopting it and using it more widely now. So yeah, it's quite useful. The fundamental principle of material design is that it's using flat interface objects, but treating them as though they are real life materials. So you use layers, things stack, and they have depth and presence in relationship to each other. So it's still using flat objects, but it's giving them more of a contextual relationship between each other to make it feel more tangible. Because obviously pure flat design is flat, and there isn't any sort of depth to it. So it's adding that depth back in that you used to have with skeuomorphic, and then everyone kind of trashed it because it wasn't trendy anymore, and it's bringing that back into. The reason why I find it so useful is because the reason that Google have developed it is to create more meaningful and tangible design, which ultimately is a better user experience. So it's driven more by functionality than it is by fashion.
Streaming works and brought people's internet connections, and even now you look at websites, there's far more video integration, and I think you're going to see a lot more actual interfaces which work with a kind of more motion integrate, and even down to things like icons and the way you interact. We're doing some stuff at the moment which is already leaning towards a more kind of Minority Report style future where you're engaging and actually physically interacting with interfaces. So it may well be that in the future when you want to throw something away, you literally grab hold of it, scrunch it up and chuck it, and that action itself might mean that you're throwing something. Just the way that you integrate with these icons, what we've got so used to icons, I think is going to change quite a bit, and that's. Going to be a big player. I mean, already that's kind of taken off with not just mobile devices, but obviously things like Oculus and all those kind of devices. We're going to be using a lot more of that, I think, moving forward. I'm actually doing some stuff now for a TV company where the actual interface that you use, rather than using a remote, is done from you're watching your program on a VR headset, and you actually reach and go, right, I don't want that program, I want that program, and you can skim through it. So I think that kind of interaction is definitely where it's going to be. It's going to be less icon-based and more moving towards physical kind of actions, I think.
I try to ignore trends in the context of guiding how I work. Obviously, trends are important for creating the different types of work that we do, but I try not to let them guide my work in a sort of primary way. So I like designers like Anthony Burrell who are concerned more with the meaning of their work rather than the way that it looks, and the aesthetic is important, but it doesn't lead the project. So I think I always think that design that's that has context and richness to the meaning and the message is more powerful than just trends-driven design.
How does skeuomorphic design and flat design affect us as a business within our own UX design? Well, obviously it does. We always need to be on trend. We always need to see what's happening out there and reflect best practice. And I would suggest that most of my guys are going to be doing flat design. But my job as an experienced designer who's been around for many, many years is to always allow people to look at heritage and look at things that maybe aren't within their bubble of what's now. So yeah, I'm very open to whatever's going on. And I'm very much about solutions and ideas rather than just surface aesthetic. If something's flat or it's skeuomorphic or it's whatever, that to me is far less important than is the form following function and is it doing it in a beautiful way. And I like to distance myself to a degree from that, but inevitably, people get used to a trend, they get used to a mythology. So if you try and be too radical, you can create problems. And it depends on the solution. If you're doing something for trendies and it's something very fashion orientated or something, and it's light, it's frivolous, have fun, be crazy. If you're trying to do something business to business and people need to access information quickly and efficiently, then yeah, I think you need to follow a certain amount of current thinking in order to facilitate that journey.
It's the same with anything, isn't it? Like clothing or cars or trends come and go. I don't think anything necessarily kills anything else, but it's kind of an evolutionary process. So yeah, skeuomorphism still exists. So do flares. People still wear flares, don't they? And they still exist, but they're not necessarily the sort of the most popular trend at this moment in time. And normally, what I think happens in human culture is that everything just keeps getting remixed. So eventually we'll probably see the return of some form of skeuomorphism in a different, more modern take. So I don't think anything's responsible for killing anything else in terms of trends. I think it's just a natural progression that people make. Humans get bored of things after a while, so they have to make something new so that they are continually interested in it. And if interface design never changed style, then it would be impossible to create new and compelling design because everything would look similar. The trends are, with digital, the trends are dictated by technology because 10 years ago you wouldn't be able to have an image object and a text block and have them overlaid very easily, but now it's very easy to do, so people do it. I mean, VR is something that's happening now, but in the future I could certainly imagine a world where we have digital implants in our heads that give us information, through that, so we don't have to interact with an object or with a device or a platform. The information is delivered through that sort of method. I think that will happen eventually.
They get as familiar as you can with what happens under the bonnet. So really get some sort of grasp on coding and some sort of grasp on the actual limitations of what you can do as a designer, because just concentrating on how it looks, feels and the journey is so much more enriched if you actually understand what happens when you get to the coding aspect of it. I think coding is going to get more and more automated. I think it's going to get a much simpler process, and I think you will be able to concentrate much more on the doing, the feeling, the emotional response, which in my book's good. But for now, I think it's really important that you understand the practicality as well as the driving.